Joanna Simpson was a beloved member of her community, a mother and a friend. Her life, filled with promise and joy, was tragically cut short by a crime that shocked the nation. Born in 1964, Joanna was known for her warm personality, dedication to her family, and was described as a very kind and warm-hearted child. Her family moved to the Isle of Man when Joanna was 10 years old, where she loved being in the countryside with the family dogs. As an adult, Joanna was always very driven. She attended a grammar school in Oxford, then went on to Bath University to study business studies. As her career was thriving, she met her first husband, but sadly the marriage wasn't to last and ended 3 years later. After her first marriage, a friend who was a purser for British Airways took her on a trip to South Africa, where she meets First Officer Robert Brown in March 1998. Brown swept Joanna off her feet, and the pair were engaged by December the same year and married 7 weeks later. But behind the whirlwind romance, Joanna's family were unhappy with his behaviour. He was rude, arrogant, and her parents failed to see what Joanna saw in him. Her father told Joanna that Brown was to sign a prenuptial agreement if the marriage was to continue, which Brown agreed. Joanna and Brown's marriage had begun to deteriorate immediately, marked by increasing tension and conflict. Witnessing the way he spoke to staff on their honeymoon in South Africa, Joanna told her mother she knew that she had made a mistake marrying Brown. However, Joanna was determined to make her marriage work, and in April of the following year, Joanna discovered she was pregnant with their first child, followed by the couple's second child being born just 17 months later. Joanna decided that it would be best for her not to work due to Brown's long-haul flights, so chose to settle in Ascot, Berkshire, close to London Heathrow Airport for Brown's work and surrounded by the stunning Windsor Great Park. Joanna quickly made friends in the area, including Hattie Barkworth-Nanton and Belinda Scudder, who described her as a brilliant individual, friend and soulmate. Joanna was a friendly and welcome addition to the area, constantly opening her home to families, holding spontaneous supper evenings that were always arranged during the afternoon school run. In the early days, when her friends were getting to know her, she was excited to introduce Brown to her friends. But he was always dismissive and rude to them whenever they were there. He was very distant and went out of his way to put her down in front of her friends, which would sometimes reduce Joanna to tears. But for the sake of her children and her friends, Joanna would always continue on and smile. Belinda met Joanna a year into their marriage and was always cautious around Brown, as they never knew how he would react. Joanna would always go out of her way to make excuses for Brown's behaviour, but her friends noticed she was always more relaxed when he wasn't around. As the years went on, Brown's behaviour escalated, and it became more difficult for him to hide his disdain. He became even more dismissive, and in 2007, Joanna made the decision to speak to a solicitor. In February 2007, Brown's behaviour became erratic. Whilst working in Hong Kong, Brown phoned Joanna and told her how he was having dark thoughts, including killing her and the children with an axe, and also killing himself by crashing the plane he was flying. At this point, Joanna put the phone down and phoned one of his friends to check on him, and when he phoned back, he told her Brown was fine. This was all a way of adding pressure in such a way to control the divorce, which had the desired effect on Joanna, as she was visibly distressed by the call. Another incident occurred between Joanna and Brown. Joanna called her friend and whispered repeatedly, "Can you come over?" When her friend arrived, Joanna was standing in the doorway and explained she had been out with the children for the evening. Brown had helped her put them to bed and then proceeded to accuse her of having an affair, which Joanna denied. Standing with his back to a drawer, Brown pulled out a large kitchen knife and held it against her throat. Joanna had heard in these situations the best thing to do was appeal to something which they loved, which in this case was his children. Joanna tried to calm him down by explaining that if he killed her, he would go to prison and the children would be left without their parents. Eventually, Brown did put the knife down, and her friend encouraged her to phone the police, but Joanna didn't want to cause any disruption for the children. After telling her mother about the incident, her parents arranged for her to stay with them, and Joanna was on the next flight out to the Isle of Man. She told Brown that she could no longer live with him and started official divorce proceedings. Getting Brown out of her life proved difficult, and any money that was offered, Brown refused, even ignoring the advice of his lawyer, as the offer was never good enough. Joanna didn't want to spend any time with him, but he refused to leave the house. resulting in Joanna's brother hiring a bodyguard for her protection. Eventually, Brown agreed to a personal arrangement where he would not go near the house, prompted by Joanna filing for an injunction against him. Constantly breaking the agreement, Brown was seen in the garden, and when dropping the children back at the home after visiting with him, he would always put a foot over the doorstep to remind Joanna who was in control. Joanna was beaten down and couldn't see an end to Brown's behaviour even after the divorce was over. However, family and friends were relieved to discover that Brown had a new girlfriend that he had moved in with and were expecting a child together. They thought this would provide them with the space that they needed to get through the divorce and hopefully to move forward with their lives. In October 2010, after a visit to her parents, Joanna's mother dropped her off at the airport for the last time. On October 31, 2010, the relationship reached a tragic and violent climax. Brown, fueled by rage and a bitter divorce, returned their children to Joanna after they had spent the school holidays with him. Joanna had missed her children, so had prepared them their favourite meal of chicken casserole and chocolate cake, which she had made from scratch. When Brown arrived at the home, the children were sent off to play and an argument broke out between the two of them, where Brown beat Joanna to death with a claw hammer. Panicking, he wrapped her in a plastic sheet and placed her body in the boot of his car. On the evening of the 31st, Joanna's friend Belinda left a message on her phone, but was not particularly worried that she hadn't responded. However, the next day, Belinda received a phone call from the children's school asking if she knew the whereabouts of Joanna, as the children had not been into school that morning. Concerns for Joanna begin to increase when Brown makes a cryptic phone call to Thames Valley Police Station.
Hello, Thames Valley Police, Nicole speaking.
Yeah, hello. I'd like to make an appointment to come in regarding an incident that occurred yesterday.
Okay. Can I ask what the incident was?
It's of a domestic issue.
Right, okay. So you wanted to make an appointment to speak to someone about it?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, usually with our domestic policies, what we do is we advise that we losses to 10 within the hour, but if you want to make an appointment instead of that, I can still do that with you.
Yes, I'd rather come up to the police station, as I've got 4 children here, and I wouldn't want to...
That's fine, that's not a problem.
To worry them any further.
Okay.
I mean, I won't, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Let me take some details from you. Yeah. Okay, then I will go into our diary and we'll book an appointment with you. Can you just explain to me what the situation is?
Well, I've spoken to my lawyer and he said not to say anything. So
can I ask why he said that?
The incidents of a serious nature. I really don't want to say anything actually.
I'm assuming it's regarding with your ex-partner?
Yes.
Okay. And the incidents occurred recently?
Yes, last night.
Right. And you're both okay, are you? You're not, none of you are harmed at all, are you?
Well, we have one person is.
Right. Okay. Is that person seeking any medical attention? Do you know? Do they need it?
No.
No.
But,
Police were also concerned for Joanna's welfare, so visited her home and broke in to find blood splatter on the stairwell, but Joanna was nowhere to be found. The fact that the children were supposed to be with Joanna and were still with their father worried the police, but all attempts to locate Joanna had not been successful. When Brown arrives at the police station, he is immediately arrested on suspicion of murder. During the first 24 hours of interviews, detectives became aware that Brown felt he was of a higher intellect than the 2 female interviewers and displayed narcissistic behaviour. The first interview consisted of very direct questions in an attempt to get Brown to tell police where Joanna was. Although Brown had turned himself in, he was silent and offered no urgency to help detectives. Detectives regrouped and decided to give him back control of the interview to get him to open up. Alongside this, the search outside for Joanna is fast-paced to try and find any clues as to where she could be. The detective's plan to give Brown control worked, and he started to talk, describing himself as the victim. He was obsessed with the family's finances and insisted he had been robbed during the divorce. On the second day of interviews, police introduced forensic photos to Brown, including of the blood splatter in the hallway. At this point, Brown stopped the interview and stated that he needed to speak to his solicitor. The police were concerned that the interviews would either be over or he would be ready to talk about where Joanna was. When the solicitor told them that they were ready, Brown broke down and confirmed that he in fact killed Joanna. He described to police how he had made the decision to kill Joanna that day, taking a claw hammer wrapped in masking tape in his children's homework bag. After dropping the children off at home and they were out of sight, he repeatedly hit Joanna over the head with the hammer and put her in the back of his car. He then told the children that their mother wasn't feeling well and needed to go to hospital, and left with the children and Joanna's body in the car to dispose of her. He dropped his children at his home with his girlfriend and drove to Windsor Great Park, where he buried her body in a pre-dug grave. Brown was escorted in handcuffs to the site where he had buried Joanna, and her body was recovered. The autopsy report shows that Joanna had been hit with the hammer at least 14 times and had left her face seriously disfigured. Police told Joanna's mother that they would never have found her if Brown hadn't taken them to where she was buried. Police then take family, including Joanna's children, to the burial site, located down a steep bank in the middle of the woods in Windsor Great Park. The children recognised the area immediately, as it was where Brown would regularly take them to play in a den that they had found. The 6-foot grave was located around the corner from the den where the children would play, and also under the flight path of Brown's long-haul flights. Brown was remanded in custody and awaited trial. On May the 11th, 2011, at Reading Crown Court, Brown entered a plea of not guilty, shocking everyone in the room. Everything pointed to murder, and the prosecution were confident, heavily relying on evidence of planning, digging her grave months in advance, and taking the murder weapon to the house in his children's bag. When Brown took the stand, he appeared to take the courtroom over, crying and apologising for what he had done, but to Joanna's family and friends, it never felt like a real apology. His defence had painted the picture of him being a victim, and Joanna had all the control in the marriage due to the prenup and the house, and how that life was very difficult for him. Brown was arrogant, talking about Joanna in a way that her mother didn't recognise her. The trial that was supposed to last 3 weeks only lasted 10 days, where closing arguments were made, with Brown's defence labelling Joanna as a rich and controlling ex-wife. In a cruel twist, on the 26th of May 2011, the jury found Brown not guilty of murder, and guilty of manslaughter on the grounds of adjustment disorder. The judge delivered the maximum sentence possible, and he was given 26 years in prison. The judge questioned the adjustment disorder, saying, "You intended to kill her," and that it was a miscarriage of justice for the victim's mother. Brown was scheduled to be released from prison in November 2023, however his automatic release was blocked by the government, to the relief of Joanna's friends and family. Brown will now be referred to a parole board to determine whether or not he will be released. Joanna Simpson's tragic death and shocking verdict left a void in her community and lasting impact on her loved ones, which reached far and wide. As a result of losing both their parents, Joanna's children went to live with her mother, something which Joanna's mother takes solace in. The prosecution relied heavily on the meticulous planning and lengths Brown had gone to prepare for Joanna's murder, including the pre-dug grave and taking the murder weapon to her home in his children's bag. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastating effects of domestic violence, and that forensic evidence doesn't always lead to the desired result. However, now, through the work of the Joanna Simpson Trust, her legacy continues to bring hope and support to those in need. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more interesting case files, and let me know in the comments if there's any cases you would like to see on the channel. Thanks for watching and stay safe.